We have a little bit of some very significant news that I think I want to talk about today because it's happened. It's finally happened. Recently, we got the Avengers Doomsday cast list come out. Well, at least part of it. We got about 27 actors, and the rumor is that there's 50 actors in total involved with the film. And there was a lot of discussion around the way that it was announced and who they announced, but one of the things that they particularly noted, and everyone noted, is that there weren't a lot of female characters on the roster. There was Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm, there was Florence Pugh's Yelena, there was Letitia Wright's Black Panther, I suppose. Who else was there? Ghost, I think, Rebecca Romaine Mystique. I think it was only 5 out of the 27 names that were women. It was a lot of men. And that is very significant because whether you've realized it or not, Marvel has been constantly bombarding us with female characters front and center ever since this moment from Endgame.
Don't worry. She's got help.
And a lot of people have taken note of it, and some people, at least on the internet, are very critical of this and questioning exactly where did the female characters go.
Like, where are all the ladies? That's right.
I saw people on Twitter particularly getting mad and saying that what is it with this ratio? There is such a higher percentage of men on this roster than women. That's what they brought up, the word ratio, the word percentage in terms of what female characters are here and in comparison to male characters. Rachel Leichman of the Mary Sue even did an article asking where are all the ladies, talking about the ratio of male to female characters. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this because I've been talking about female characters here for a very, very long time and how they've been utilized. It's a specific passion of mine. And I want to specifically talk about the term ratio or percentage that I keep seeing thrown around by those angry at this. But first of all, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people aren't bringing up in terms of this discussion, is that if you want to talk about the female characters going to be involved with this film, Marvel, the MCU, has actually burned bridges with a lot of their female talent, and I'm surprised that that isn't coming up in the discussion more. Scarlett Johansson, if you watched interviews with her around Black Widow, which I did, she was talking very, very definitively that she wanted it to end here, that she wanted to quit while she was ahead, end on a high note for herself, and that she wanted to go out on her own terms. As she was going out, though, there was a huge lawsuit against her and Disney, who tried to rip her off of the money that they had promised for that film. And while they tried to throw her under the bus twice, even though she eventually got her money, and part of the reason they did that is they released the case to the public. So Scarlett Johansson's relationship with Disney and Marvel really broke down on the way out, and she has said in interviews very definitively, again, she's dead, she's not coming back. I think the only way they could possibly get her back is to offer her Robert Downey Jr. money. First of all, it would be a question if she would even get that after what happened before, but I don't think that they have enough money to offer another actor and pay them that much. Also, I don't think they care about Black Widow's character that much. That's another story we'll get to in just a second. But let's go through the other actresses who might have been involved who aren't available. Elizabeth Olsen. She has talked many, many times in so many words saying that working on Doctor Strange 2 was a nightmare. She didn't understand what they were doing with Wanda. She couldn't wrap her head around why Wanda was doing those things. She was unhappy with the experience on set. She was unhappy with how her character was treated, and she has said very, very definitively also in interviews that she does not want to come back, even though it's come up a lot is that there is a group of people who like that version of the character, I suppose want her to be redeemed, but she's been very, very definitive about not wanting to come back, and it's a similar situation while it didn't end up with anybody getting sued, where she didn't like how her experience, she didn't like how her character was ultimately treated, and she doesn't want to come back. Now, what are some other the actresses out there? Evangeline Lilly, she has said she's retired. Zoe Saldana, well, she actually wanted to leave the MCU at Guardians 2, and James Gunn originally was going to give her a way out, but then they wanted her back for Infinity War, and then that led to her being in Endgame because they wanted to give her back to James Gunn, and that led her to being in Guardians 3, which James Gunn didn't even really have a story for her. So she wanted to exit 3 movies ago, but now she's got several Avatar films lined up. She's gotten her Oscar, whether she deserved it or not. So I don't see any reason for Zoe Saldana to come back, no matter how much money that they offer her. So, and meanwhile, there's Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, and obviously most people hate Captain Marvel with the way the MCU has done her, but also Brie became disillusioned by the role. She became disillusioned by the backlash. It wasn't what she thought it would be. There's a lot of reports on that, and I don't think Marvel wants to hire her again because of how volatile that discussion became. So that's a lot of bridges that have been burned with the female talent and characters. So you have to consider that is part of the reason. Like, their top people would probably be Scarlett Johansson and Elizabeth Olsen, but those people have reason not to come back. Zoe Saldana has reason not to come back, and Brie Larson, Captain Marvel, ultimately did not work out, even though her initial movie got $1 billion. So wanted to get that out there. That is part of what is going on here. There are other names that could possibly show up in the film, whether the first or the second. Perhaps Karen Gillan as Nebula, perhaps Pom Klementieff's Mantis, perhaps they secured Halle Berry as Storm to be able to show up. We don't know yet, but that's still not a very high ratio of male to female characters, as there's other rumors about even more male characters coming into the film. So that's part of it, and that's part of what's going to be an element in this video. Marvel, throughout that entire era of pushing female characters to the max, didn't take care of a lot of their female talent involved, to the point that multiple big names don't want to come back. So that's a big thing that I want to talk about. But I want to talk about here leading into the idea of ratios, and the idea that these people are angry that there isn't a good ratio of male to female characters. I would say that is highly disrespectful. It misses the entire point, and it isn't an argument with any substance, and that way of thinking is the very reason why Marvel is now hesitant to put in more female characters, or at least more resistant even. What I think is happening here is beyond the bridges that they burn with these people, is I do think a major overcorrection is happening. I've talked about it for a while that I think Hollywood is going to overcorrect a lot from all the criticism that they've been getting in recent years. In some ways, maybe in negative ways, negative overcorrection. I do think that's part of it, but these people advocating for ratios, more ratios of female characters to male characters, are the very reason why we're not getting more female characters at this point. Why? Because that's not actually seeing them as characters. That's not actually considering, are these characters good? That's not actually considering, are people really connecting with these characters? The people who want there to be more of a ratio of female and male characters in these movies are only thinking about achieving a quota, getting a percentage so that they personally can feel that they've achieved something, that they fought against something, I guess. But you're forgetting something. This is stories we're talking about. This is characters that are supposed to feel human, characters that we're supposed to connect with. And the problem with all of these female characters that they released is they were released en masse in these movies and pushed so hard, but not few of them, if any of them, were really good. Does anyone care about Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel? I recently did a video on that. She's a character. She's a perfect example of what I'm talking about here. I'm going to get out my rogue action figure to fidget with while I'm talking here. But Kamala Khan is a character that started off harmless, but she didn't have a lot of substance to her. She wasn't really handled well or given much intrigue as a character, and now she's been pushed so hard for so many years, and with no consideration about how to make her more appealing or how people are reacting to it, that a lot of people just hate the character, not because the character is even that hateable, but because they haven't connected with her, and she's just been pushed so hard. And the same is true for all of this cavalcade of female characters, like Ant-Man's daughter, who I can't even remember her name, or Ghost, or Yelena. Florence Pugh is a great actress, but I don't think that character is working out. Or Letitia Wright's Black Panther. She works so much better as just a supporting character. She does not work as Black Panther. This push of female characters with no substance, with no strategy, with no character, with no consideration if they're actually connecting with the audience. But the only thing is just appeasing a certain minority who screams about needing to fill in a ratio and a percentage. That is the entire problem, because what happens is we get filled up with all of these bland female characters that are put in there just for ratios that we don't care about. We complain about them like people were complaining about Captain Marvel years before the controversy came on, when they were pushing her so hard but her character wasn't working. And every time, the response to that was just dismissing people's criticisms, saying that these are just misogynists or whatever, saying that these people just hate female characters. And guess what happens with that? When you don't take people's criticisms in good faith, you don't consider what they're saying, you don't even analyze the characters at hand, you just support them because they're female characters and you expect everyone else to do the same or be shamed, then what that happens is that agitates the critics of these characters. They become more agitated and they start to hate these female characters even more. And they start to hate the very principle of pushing more female characters in films. And that is what's gone on more and more. Captain Marvel wasn't working in the comics, pushed her harder, changed her into more of an angry, unlikable character, pushed her harder. People didn't like it, accused them of all these kinds of things, made bad faith criticisms against the critics of these characters, become more agitated, get more hate, and that is what led up to the blow up of how many people hate Captain Marvel's character. Carol Danvers originally was not a hated character, but she became that way because of how they promoted her. Not even to say that she has no substance, the new version does not, but just add to the fact of how you promoted that character, insisting that everyone had to like her and that she was going to be in everything. Everyone has to like Miss Marvel. Everyone has to like these characters, even if there's absolutely nothing that they find interesting or relatable. That is only causing more agitation or even just disillusion amongst people. So shut up about your stupid ratios. You don't care about if these female characters are good. You don't care if they're actually having the work put in behind the scenes. Scarlet Witch? Yeah, she's a character that got more promotion in the films. She's also the most butchered character in all of these films, so she's associated with being a maniac who killed everyone for her fake children now. The Scarlet Witch character has been tainted because of what they've done. Black Widow, honestly, she was the best female character in Marvel when she started out, but over time, her character was handled worse and worse. She honestly did not get a good send-off in these films. Miss Marvel, they've never been able to figure out how to make that character connect on a wider level. Same goes for Captain Marvel, but Carol Danvers could have been a good character because if you read Chris Claremont's work on the character, he was the one guy who got that character to work when she was a part of the X-Men, because Chris Claremont, the guy who got all of these most popular female characters in Marvel to work on the X-Men, here is the reason why he got them to work. He didn't see female characters as female characters. He saw them as characters. He looked at Storm and Jean Grey and Rogue and all of these characters he created, and he looked at them with the ideas that he had for who they would be and what arcs they would go on. That is why his female characters were good. That is why when he wrote for Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel, when he did, she was finally an interesting character. The problem with how a lot of people approach female characters is they just see them as female characters. They see them as women first. They see them as tokens that they have to put out to appease people. They don't see them as actual characters. They don't have any actual interest as writing them as characters, whereas they do for male characters. And that is the whole problem. So you, with all your ratios, did you ever criticize Marvel for the way that they treated Scarlet Witch or Black Widow? Did you ever criticize them for Kate Bishop Hawkeye or Letitia Wright Black Panther or I can't remember, Ant-Man's daughter? All of these characters either misused, mistreated, or not even well drawn. But you people never actually looked at how these characters were actually being written or non-written. You never actually considered that not a lot of people genuinely like them. You just want to promote them to get your ratios so that you'll feel better about yourself, so you can feel like you've achieved something. But it's all artificial. It's all a look. Black Widow as a character mattered when she started because in the beginning she was good. She had a fan base. But that doesn't matter if you're going to destroy the character on the way out and disrespect the actor so she doesn't even want to come back. And a lot of us out there criticized how these female characters were being handled. And we warned what would happen in the future, is because there is some truth to the criticisms against Marvel. They only do more female characters because it was a trend, because it was a fad, not because they thought it would be really interesting. You know, the one character that they could not get off the ground in the Infinity Saga was Captain Marvel, their female lead, their big female lead. But the problem is that they saw this as a trend because of Me Too and all that was going on in the world. They saw this as a trend. And if we can just get out these female characters, we'll make more money. Not actual effort or consideration on how to make these characters popular, just to get them out there to follow the trend. And as people were criticizing them for how they were using these female characters and that it wasn't good, then the other side just defended it vehemently without any consideration and shamed anyone who would disagree with the new ratios. And I warned for a long time that what's going to happen is the pendulum is going to swing the other way. These female characters aren't profitable, so it's going to go right back to the way it was, where they see this as, oh, people don't want to go to cinema to see female characters, even though there's multiple examples of that not being true when they're good. But that's exactly what's happened now. People just want it to be the boys' club again. Sure, we'll go to that because we're seeing that these activists who keep screaming about ratios and female characters aren't actually a majority and they don't actually make us money. So you've lost your voice now because you people who shilled for what these companies were doing and the ratios of female characters have lost your voice because they've realized that you don't actually pull in the money on any of these projects. I don't know if I should get into it in this video, but I have a little bit more knowledge about the history of Carol Danvers' character and how she's been treated as a female character over the years. But it might be a little bit too much for now, but if you get into that history, you'll see just how much female characters in sort of superhero media and whatnot are very much treated as tokens. The reason why they don't get a lot of good writing is because they're used as tokens and because not a lot of people have interest in them. Listen, any character, whether male or female, can be relatable and well written to anyone because any human being can be relatable to anyone. What you need is writers to actually care about them and promote them forward. That's why Chris Claremont, as I brought up, he was great at writing female characters because he just wrote them as people. He wasn't tokenizing them. That's why to this day, people say they still want to see characters like Storm appear in media because he wrote them very well. They actually have fan bases. And that's the tragic thing about what's happening with Marvel is it's a money thing again. We're right back to where it was, where they're not going to do more female characters because they don't see money associated with it. And it's sad, not because I want ratios, but because there's so many good female characters as a part of X-Men that I would still like to see in movies and to have prominent roles like they do in the comics. There are so many good X-Men characters, like a character like Emma Frost, who I was just surprised to see how she's been developed in comics. There are just so many good characters that you guys don't know about yet. And it's sad if those characters won't wind up in films because of this. But these idiot activists have no one to blame but themselves because they wouldn't listen to any criticism in good faith. They just shilled for the idea of ratios rather than well-written female characters, and this is where they're at right now. Pushing female characters and seeing them as nothing more than percentages actually does sound more misogynistic than anything else. And it won't help because it's not enough to just have technically a lot more female characters in your films. You have to have writers who actually care about their writing. So what can be done in the future? Well, I'm going to just advocate for good writing and to bring about these female characters, not because they're female, but because they're good characters. Bring about these characters from the X-Men, not because they're female, but because they're good characters that a lot of people would want to see. That is what I'm going to advocate for, but abandon this stupid idea of ratios that's only harmed female characters all the more. And now because of you, it's going to be harder than ever to even get female characters off the ground. Because of you, activists and people who sit on Twitter and scream. I hope you realize that. I have a lot more to say about this topic, but I think that that's it for now. Thank you all for watching. What did you think of this video? What do you think of the future of these female characters are? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to support my work, check out the Patreon page, and I will see you guys next time.